Hey guys, I am going to walk through how to create this really pretty eucalyptus watercolor piece digitally on Procreate. Of course you can follow along with the watercolors, but I'm actually really excited to go into a technique with you based off of a particular brush pack. So if you want to follow along with the exact brush pack that I have, I've linked it below, so snag that now. So if you already have my book, we're going to also follow along inside here with a quick tutorial on eucalyptus. If you don't have this, not to worry, we're going to be going over it step by step. But if you do have it, Peggy Dean's Guide to Nature Drawing in Watercolor, we are going to page 130. And we are going to be creating a eucalyptus plant right here. So I'm going to set this off to the side and walk through this with you guys. So the brush set that I'll be using is actually Aqua Real, and you'll see again that's linked below. And the first thing that I wanted to mention is that it comes with these like watercolor paper canvases, and there's 3 different ones: cold press, candy floss, and chiffon. So you can see it's got some grit to it. And then the other one is like, this is the candy floss, so it's toothy, and then the chiffon is a little bit lighter with texture, but still pretty toothy. So this is the one that I'm going to use. And now the brush set, I've got those open in here, so we'll walk through those as we get into this. But then the other thing that I wanted to mention is the amount of, let's see, I'll start, yeah, right here. The amount of color palettes that come with this pack. Like, these are all the color palettes that come with it. So we'll be using those as a reference as well, or a resource. And again, use whatever you have on hand, that's perfect. But this is gonna give us a very realistic watercolor effect that I am very excited to share with you. So the first thing I'm gonna do is grab the sketching and detail pencil that is in this pack, and it's the very top one. And the cool thing about this one is that it is real fine, and it has that kind of like slight transparency that, and then the pressure sensitivity to really make it look like a sketch. I'm actually going to utilize that and keep it in the illustration because I think it's going to look really beautiful when it's finished and kind of make it look like it was sketched before watercolor, which is, you know, similar to what we're going for anyway. So I'm actually going to change the color on this. I'm going to set my default palette to, I think the either Rose Garden or Peach and Sage would be good. I'll go with Peach and Sage. And then I have that as my default, and I'm just going to snag maybe this dark olive color. So we're gonna go up with a stem, and I'm just doing this really light because this is, again, just our sketch. So up with our stem, I wanna make sure that's centered. I guess you can always move it, but just because. And then I'm gonna bring this on down to create more of a full stem. I think I'm going to also come in and just adjust this side a little bit so it's a little bit skinnier. There we go. And then from here, I'm going to draw some petioles coming off of that stem. So they're gonna go in the same growth direction of the stem. So they're gonna come up and off. So rather than coming off like this, they're coming up and off, like so. So I'm gonna create these kind of shorter in the beginning here, but then as I get down the stem more, I'm gonna get them a little bit longer. So they vary in length, but have more room to breathe, if you will. So, okay, so there's the beginning of my sketch. And then I'm also going to add these silver dollar leaves. So this is like a silver dollar eucalyptus. They are pretty, I'm gonna actually bring that into this one so it's kind of on its side. They're pretty cylinder, if you've ever looked at one of these plants, and they have really, really beautiful leaves. Nice and round. There we go. So they are gonna get smaller as we get toward the top, and then this one I'm going to have on its side kind of also like that. So when you do them just a lot more narrow, then it looks like they are more on their side. And then you could also do something like where the stem is more toward the top of that shape, which gives the illusion of it kind of tilting to the side rather than being just like straight up and down. And as we complete this, I'm getting smaller. I think I want to bring that out here. Yeah. And then a little bit smaller toward the top, and then maybe one kind of on its side a little more. And then if this is looking bare, mine's looking a little bit bare, so I actually want to add some more stems in here. And I might even want that to be a little bit shorter, so I'm going to erase this part, and I'm actually just going to grab my selection tool, whoops, and freehand around this guy and bring it in more. That's the nice thing about being able to work digitally, is that you can edit a lot easier than if you were actually going on real paper. Okay, and then I want to overlap a few. So I'm going to have like one come off, whoops, one come off just above this one, and then I'm actually going to have it peekaboo kind of from behind that one. And the idea here when you do that with the overlap is that, you know, ideally it would follow through like this, and so that way you know exactly where it's coming on each side. Whereas, like, you know, if I have one, just as an example, let's see, it's right here, and I have it coming here, and then I have it coming out of the top and down. If I had it like way over here, this wouldn't line up with this because of the angle. So my recommendation on how to really go about making sure that these are nice and even is, as you're drawing the shape, this one would be too large, so I'm actually not even going to get that far into it. But if I was to go on the other side, what I would do is come up and then just hover where that line would go and then continue. And that really helps with making sure that they are nice and even. Make that a little bit larger. There we go. So you have a couple overlapping ones. You've got some on their side. You've got some face up. Might go a little further. Okay, here's a good example. So you can come up and just follow hover to right here to make sure that they are nice and even. Okay, so with your sketch, if you're happy with it, you can keep it nice and bold. This is just our sketch layer, so we can adjust it later, or we can remove it completely. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually go and turn the opacity down to my sketch layer, so I might end up doing that later, or actually I'll do it a little bit now. So I'm going to about 70%. And then what I'm going to do is on these canvases, if you don't have this canvas, that's fine. You can just have, like, you know, use a regular canvas and just add layers and do everything that we're doing here. You just won't have this top layer, which is the paper effects. So it would look like this instead of like this, which, whatever, that's totally fine. Okay, so I'm going to create a new layer on top of that. And then that's going to be my first, basically my painting layer. And I want my sketch to actually be on the top. So I'm going to rename this and say sketch. And the reason I want that on top is because everything that I'm doing will then be underneath. So I'll still be able to see my sketch. I'll still be able to see like where I'm filling stuff in. And then when everything's said and done, the watercolor won't, like, the effect of what we're doing digitally won't totally cover that up. So we can see if we want to keep some elements, which is kind of fun, or get rid of them. Okay, so this is going to be my first like main layer for painting. So I'm just going to say like my main wash. So I'll say main wash, and you don't have to title your layers. I usually don't, but for this I want to make sure that I'm really organized so that I can make these effects to their full potential. Okay, so I'm gonna choose a color now that I want to create in, I don't know, this is a good palette, but maybe I think I want these to be a little more cool tones because it is eucalyptus. So I might even go, well, actually no, those colors are really nice. Okay, no, I will use this one, sorry guys. So I'm gonna grab another sagey color. This one's like a nice grayish sage color. And then I will go to my brush set again, and now I'm gonna use the round brush the all-rounder right here. And I want to make sure that the size of this is not too large because I'm going to be basically drawing along these edges and then filling them in. So something to note as we do this is if you lift the Apple pencil on this particular brush, then it will, once you hit it again, it'll cause like a little seam, which is actually really similar to an actual watercolor technique, or you know, when you're using paint. So that's totally fine. If that happens and you don't like it, what this set has been programmed to do is you can go to wet blending brush, and then you can just go to those areas and just blend them out. And then they are soft again and they don't have that seam, which is nice. Okay, so, and sometimes you might want that seam though, because that's like that organic effect. What's happening? What am I on here? Main wash. Oh, because I'm not on the right brush, haha. Okay, so make sure you're on round brush, the all-rounder. Come up here, come down, and it's okay if it doesn't like perfectly match your sketch. I actually want that to be filled in, so I'm just gonna redo it real quick. Okay, and then the one behind that, I'm going to create separation like this because that's how I would paint it actually. And then I have that little seam. I might want that seam to go up higher. What you can do is go to the eraser and just hold it down. And when you hold down the eraser, it's gonna bring up the same brush you were using. So rather than like pressing undo to get rid of that and then having to redo it, I can just go in with the eraser with the same brush and then create that seam again. I'm gonna bring this down a little bit. Okay, so what I noticed here is that if I were to turn my sketch layer off, it's going to kind of have that disappear a little bit, which I don't love. So what I can do later, what I would do later, I'm gonna do now so that you can see how I'm gonna like remedy that. I'm gonna create a clipping mask. So you could of course change the color, like that's obvious, but I'm gonna create a clipping mask. So I create a layer on top of that main layer, create a clipping mask, and then I'm just going to a new color, something that's maybe brownish or maybe more green. Maybe I'll go to this brown color and kind of cool it down a little bit. Yeah, something like that. And then you can see there's a new color there. So I'm gonna actually go into this bloom accent. Again, this is something that I would do later, but I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna make sure that's way down. And I'm just going to kind of start at the edge. Don't look at what I'm doing here. Only look at the base of this one because that's the one that I kind of want to focus on more. And then what I'm going to do is go back and erase the one underneath it. So the effect to the one underneath it. Remember, we're on a clipping mask, so anything we just did is on just that one, just where we put it. It's not going to affect the main wash. And then if I turn my sketch layer off, there's some differentiation there. So that's basically how I'm gonna combat that. And I think I don't want it cool, so I'm gonna go ahead and change that color. Yeah, okay. And of course, like as you work on layers, you can always go back and readjust your colors later. And that's totally something that I do almost every single piece because I love playing with color so much. So I'm back on all-rounder, and I'm going to all the way up here, and then I want to create a little bit of a seam in the center, just leaving a little bit of white space. And another thing that I really like to do with these brushes is if I turn my sketch layer off, see how there's some separation with the paint? That is... Oops. That's something that I really, really love because that's like something I would do in a normal situation with watercolor anyway. I would probably have some white space that I wasn't totally intentional, so leaving that makes it look more organic. Okay, and then I'll go make sure I'm on all-rounder and continue to fill these in. Leave a little white space. So like unintentional, or not unintentional, but in theory, unintentional white space. So, whoops, let's say I am, you know, just trying to fill and leave white space here, but then I have, you know, just this side here that also picked up some white space. It looks real. Like, it looks like that's really what would happen with, you know, real watercolor. So I'm just blending this seam in a little bit so it doesn't look so harsh. I'm gonna finish these out. Another thing that you can do in a situation like this is just have part of your main wash be on a separate layer. It will be a lot easier. Oh, that turned it into a clipping mask. I don't want that, so I'm gonna put it underneath. Okay. What that will do is that, you know, when you want to apply those edits to separate them, it will be a lot easier, because then all you have to do is, you know, apply the clipping mask to the layer below it, and then do that same technique that we did. What did I grab? Let's go with this. That same technique that we did with that bloom accent brush, and just do it there, and then you don't have to erase anything else. And when I turn that sketch layer off, it totally makes it look like it's in the background, like that's a shadow. So you could do it that way. I love working in multiple layers, so I'll just say like background main wash, or like main wash 2, or behind, or however you want to do that, because I know my main wash is this one. So if that helps you, you know, like we all have a different organization system when it comes to our layers, and I do recommend finding yours because it will make your workflow so very much easier. Okay, so filling this in, and I'm gonna continue doing that the whole way. I'm getting a little bit sloppy, but that's really my normal behavior anyway with watercolor. So there we go. I had that so far down, so it was taking me forever, but you saw how easy that was to smooth it out. Round brush, okay. And then I had an accidental skip there, so that wet blending brush is really helpful for that. And finishing up these little guys. I want to try to stay toward the edges. If you want to use like a smaller size for these smaller areas, it might be more helpful, because then you can really get next to that pencil line. Again, it's not that big of a deal if you're going to turn them off, but if you want just like that subtle sketch underneath, then it might be worth it to just be a little more intentional with where your placement is of your wash, or your like initial layer. And not all of these have to have that white space in the center either. Oh, this is a background one, so I'm going to go to the main wash 2 so that separation can be easier. I better plug this in. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about the stems right now. I'm going to deal with that later. Right now I want to play with the effects here and see what I can do with them. First, I want to apply even more of a watercolor technique. So you'll see in this brush set that if you go down further, there are also watercolor stamps. So these bloom stamps are really beautiful. There's also like irregular swatches and whatnot, but the bloom stamps I really like because they have this look to them. See where it looks like watercolor is actually bleeding. So I'm going to undo this. I want to create, oh my goodness, I want to create a layer on top of my first clipping mask. So this will be my main, I'll just say main clip 1. But another thing, you can look at this arrow to know it's a clipping mask, but I'm going to create another clipping mask on top of that. First I'll say main clip 2. because I'm saying main, I'm gonna get rid of this main and say just wash, underwash, that's what I'll say. Underwash, and then under clip 1 there. That makes everything better. So I have to apply this clipping mask on top. So as you can see, I have my main wash, I've got my first clipping mask, and I've got my second clipping mask. My first clipping mask is that shadow that I showed you, which I'm going to add to later, but right now I'm going to do my main clipping, or my second clipping mask on top. And for those who aren't familiar, any clipping mask is as long as the bottom one is also a clipping mask, then the top one, basically all these arrows are going to skip down to the first one that's not an arrow, which is my main wash. So I can set this down here, and you can see that it creates this really beautiful bleed. Look at the difference. So when it's smaller, if I undo it versus when I do it, it looks like that natural watercolor look. If I duplicate that clipping mask, it's just going to add to the effect and make it darker. And then you can merge those two together to keep that darkness. But I'm going to wait to do that part until I have it done for over everything. Another thing that I like about these is that you can then take this technique and just select it, and then use your tool to kind of like get it in the position of how you want it to go. Of course, you can always go to your eraser tool and maybe use like the wet blending brush or the, what am I looking for? Oh, the Bloom Accents brush, eraser wise, and you can go in and just like, am I on the right thing? Oh yeah, it was working. And just soften, soften that up so it's not so harsh if you want to. Another thing you can do is use the smudge tool. So under those same brushes, I could grab, Bloom Accents and just smudge it out, and then it kind of keeps it. These are all just different effects that you can do and play with to make it yours. There are 3 versions of this Bloom stamp, so you don't have to be stuck using the exact same one for everything. So you can see those are the 2 I had together. In a perfect world, those would be on separate layers. But if you did them on, 2 layers, then that's totally fine. I think what I want to do for this one, because this is a new clipping mask and I can erase whatever I do to that top one, I am going to apply that effect to just the bottom one, because then it will look like a shadow. I'll get rid of this one too. So see what I mean? If I take the sketch layer away, you can see how it looks like that shadow. So yeah, do that and then go back, and I'm gonna grab this Bloom stamp. Some of them are like a lot, let's get that down. Some of them are a lot more, darker than others. So you can always turn the opacity up or down. That's on a background layer. So I can create the next clipping mask that's underneath. So essentially the same thing we did with these 3, but we're doing it with these 3. And then I can apply that. I want to make sure it is a clipping mask, so it just clips to that layer. And I'm going to go back now to the Bloom Stamp 3. It's my favorite one. Make sure you're on the right layer. And I can adjust that. Oops. Make it where I want it to go. I like to have these, the bottoms of my leaves have, the primary effect, because I think that it looks really nice to come off and like have that depth there at the bottom, and then, get lighter toward the top. So you can just go around. You can be really, intentional with where you set these, or you can do them at random. Doing them at random makes them look a little more like this, which personally I'm a huge fan of, because I like a bleed in watercolor. I happen to like hot spots in watercolor, which is like a no-no. It's like, if you ever did any traditional schooling, then you know that hot spots in watercolor are not ideal. But you learn the rules to break the rules, right? So that's what we're doing here. Well, me. That's what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to take this one and push it down, maybe right here. Okay, so now I have that effect. So if I was to turn off that clipping mask, look at the difference in dimension. So there versus here. And that's just one layer of what we've done. So at this point, you can go into your blur tool and go to bloom accents or wet blended brush and go in here and kind of just like, whoops, that's too big. You know, push things where you want them to go. For those who aren't familiar, the smudge tool brush will basically grab what's above or below. So if I take some of this depth and I pull it in, yes, it does lighten, but if there's enough of it, it will actually pull it with me. So see that one? I just pull from this dark area and it pulls up. It's subtle, but it makes a difference. So I recommend playing around with that part. See, I like that hot spot there. It's what that means is basically like you had too much water on your brush and then it has that effect. So I think that's pretty fun. Okay, so next I'm going to go in and darken the initial layers. You know, my main wash, I'm gonna lighten it a bit. So I'm just gonna go to the brightness and just bump that up. So that when I add darkness, it doesn't get so dark. It just gets, you know, that more depth. So what I'm gonna do here is so I'm on my main wash. I'm going to just alpha lock it. You could do this on a new clipping mask, but if I alpha lock it, then I can just go right into that exact space and do it. So alpha lock it, and then I'm gonna grab that sage color I started with since I lightened everything else up. And I'm gonna use my bloom, where is it? Accents. I'm gonna come in here and just add some depth. Actually, I think I'm gonna go to a cooler color and maybe just make it a little darker. Yeah, I like that much better. So you could do this for two-tone, you could do it for depth, but what you're doing now is coming in here and adding just a little extra depth and interest. Notice I'm doing this pretty haphazard. I'm not like, there's not a whole lot of, you know, method, what am I saying? Method, whatever, behind it. Just coming on the outside, come in here. And then go to the back underwash. There's only two on here, but which one is it? This one. Oh, make sure it's a clipping mask. Oh, nope. Remember, I need to alpha lock it. There we go. Just add that depth. The other one's right here. Okay, so there we go. That, and then I want to also go a little smidge darker just to, oh, I'm on the under layer. Make sure you're on the right layer, just to kind of enhance that effect of the depth on the same color as before, so it doesn't get too lost. And then that lighter color is just more of that accent. And this just makes things look, you know, nice and organic and raw. I'm gonna make this brush a lot bigger, so I can kind of come from the outside and it will inch its way in. Okay. Now I'm going to go to, from the main wash, I'm gonna go and just create a new clipping mask on top of that. So clipping, I'm not gonna title it, but you can if you want to. And I'm gonna grab a real dark color. So I'm just gonna go to this kind of dark sagey color. I'm still on that bloom brush, and I'm just going to kind of start on the outside here and see, okay, so that might be too big, or not dark enough. I think I might lighten this one more time. This is something you'll end up playing with on your own too as you choose colors. So don't pay too much attention to what I'm doing because I have like my own thought process behind it. Okay, so now I'm gonna come in, make this pretty small, but I'm gonna just hit the edges with it. So see how I'm way out here, but the edges of this brush are grabbing the outside edges of this leaf. And I want to do that. I'm going to just briefly turn off my sketch layer so I can see exactly where that is grabbing. Because I really want to emphasize the edges on some of these. Not all of them, not all of them, because if I did all of them, then it wouldn't look as organic. And the whole idea is that it looks like, you know, an organic watercolor. So see how it's like this lighter area and then the darker area, it kind of makes it look more like, you know, that realistic edge that you would get if you were painting, which actually isn't always ideal. So see how that one just is like just the edge. I didn't bring it in like this. I just focused on the edge by painting on the outer space here. Big fan. I'm gonna leave that light actually and then just come in here. So this one is requiring a little more focus. That one's behind, so I will grab it. I'm not gonna create a new layer for it. I'm just gonna do it on one of these. How come? Is that not on that layer? This is another fun one where you get to figure out what layer things are on. Okay, here we go. So just out on the edges, out on the edge here. And you can bring it in more, of course. Like some parts might be just that hard edge and some might have that saturation deeper. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're switching views here. So now you are seeing my screen, so I'll just explain to you a little extra what I'm doing. So once you have that dynamic set done, I'm going to grab the Duo Color round brush and then I'm going to create another layer. Make sure it's not a clipping mask. And this is going to be my stem layer. So I'm going to name it and go in. What palette was I on? I don't even know. Okay, go in and grab like a sagey color. You might want to do something that's, you know, more contrasting. Like that would be pretty actually. I'll do this brown color. And so I'm going to go the whole length of the stem. The more pressure that you create, the more, since this is a duo tone, the more the secondary color will come out. This brown color doesn't have much of a secondary color, but to show you an example, I could come to like this one. Let's see. Subtle duo color, I mean. Well, some colors make it show much more than others. And I've seen it, but I might have actually adjusted the settings in there. But now I'm going to go to that wet blending brush and I'm going to go back to that brown that I was on. And then just the parts where I lifted up, I'm just going to drag that into itself so that it doesn't look harsh. I don't mind if it looks more like, you know, darker with more depth or something, because that's what it would look like if I actually did it. So I don't mind that, but I do want to cut some of that up. Okay, so now I am using, I'm going to go back to use the Subtle Duo and create these stems, and I'm just doing it like real soft, but then I get even lighter toward the further out that I go. And I actually do want to bring these all the way up on some of them to have it come through, but I do want to make sure I'm also on the space that I'm supposed to be on, because I'm going to keep some of these pencil lines. I'm going to erase some, but I'm going to keep some. So once I'm here, so see how some of it that's coming off of the center, like this part, I'm going to want to blend that out. So I'll grab that other brush and come in Just blend that part out real quick. And then if there's any others like that, I do want to connect this more. There we go. Okay, so that looks good to me. I will go into my sketch layer and I'm gonna take my eraser, but I'm gonna take the eraser of my pencil, just so it's easier to grab, and then I'll just erase some of these lines. And I'm gonna do kind of a poor job on purpose because I think that it's cool to see like some parts of like your initial sketch. I just think it looks cool, so I'm going to kind of embrace that. Like this part right here, I think that that's really fun. But some of it's just distracting, and like this part. So I'm gonna get rid of that. It's just too dark, you know? So, and I want this to look more realistic than that, but I will keep this bottom part because that shows, you know, even more of that organic look. Maybe take away some of the edges of these leaves. So it's softer, but not all of them because I like the imperfections. Of course, you can do anything that you want to do here. This is your project, but I am just telling you my process of what I think looks so cool. Oops, I want to keep that one. Okay. And I just don't want that harsh line on the stem. I thought I was gonna want to keep it, but I do not. All right, so there we go. Yeah, that looks a lot prettier. And I might get some of the main flowers as well so that they match that softness of the interior leaf, but some of them still have it there. It's not unless you really look, but I think that that is so fun, so that's what happened. Now, lastly, one of the things that I enjoy is like when you put a lot of emphasis on a center stem. So what that would look like is I would create a layer on top of the stem, and then I would just grab either the all-rounder or the rugged brush. You could also do this with the bloom accents, but I'm gonna stick to one of these, probably the all-rounder. And then grab a real deep color. And then I like to kind of highlight and put emphasis on the inside, but then I go in with the smudge tool, make sure I'm on the right one, and smudge basically the whole side so that it looks like it's fading out and it's not so harsh. And then you see how it just adds like that nice like shadow and depth. The thing about doing that with this type of plant is that these shapes are pretty flat. So if you're doing different kinds of leaves, then it would make a lot more sense to do something like this. But I don't know that it's the best choice for this, so I'm just going to do it to a couple of them just so I can have that emphasis because I think it's really, really pretty. But I would probably stick with this technique with different types of leaves. Is that pencil? I want to get rid of that. It's just really harsh. There. A little bit's okay, but a lot of it is too much. Okay. Maybe on this one. Smudge that out. So see how it just looks like the water just brought it to smudge out a little bit. I might even do it a little bit more to make it a little bit softer, except for that initial little crease. So see, just on a few of them, it's really, really pretty, but I don't want to go crazy. And then this brown is bugging me, so I'm going to find, is that this one? No. I'm going to find where that is. I think it's this guy. Yeah. So I'm just going to use the wet blending eraser and just lighten that significantly so it's not bugging me. All right. That's basically it, you guys. From there, if you want to add like splatter, There's some really great splatter brushes in here. So, you know, tiny sprays, random splatter. So that's going to look, oh, I got to get on the right layer. That's going to look something like, you know, that's more intense. But the tiny sprays are really, really fun if you put those behind the whole thing. So drag this layer all the way underneath everything. Something lighter like this. It just adds a little extra interest. And of course you could do that to like the top. You don't have to drag it underneath because it would make sense to have it on the top. Because it's like an effect that you throw in at the end. Some people just like every piece of art that they do, they have those splatter marks in there. Which is, it can be super fun. So you can always go in and play with the brightness, saturation. I'm going to have that be a little bit brighter. And then one of the things that you could do, this is really fun too, is go to the layer, let's see, what's my main layer? This one? And then, nope. This looks like, okay, it was main wash, and then I'm gonna, oh, I think it was just alpha locked. Anyway, I can blend, I can use my smudge tool and just kind of smudge this out a little bit. So it's like reaching into the spray. So I can do that with the underlaying one too. Let's see, underclipped, underwash on alpha lock. So it's just like coming off. And almost like there's like a super intense bleed happening, which is really fun. But I want to get rid of this pencil line right here too. There we go. Yeah, so see how that looks? It's really a fun added piece of interest there. So these are just ideas of ways that you can really make this come to life. I'll do another one just up a little bit higher. I want to grab this color because I lightened it, and I'll go to this one but make it smaller. I'm actually going to put it over here so I can select it and then change its direction. Yeah, and then I can do the same effect to the main wash of this leaf, where I can smudge the outside of the leaf so that it looks like it is blending. Or I guess, yeah, just kind of like the wash is coming off. How fun is that technique? It doesn't take much time at all. And then you have this really cool composition. So I'm just going to keep it on those two just so that I don't go too crazy, because I could easily do that to the whole thing because I just love that messy effect. So the more that you smudge these, the more you're going to have that cool fade off. So that's it, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, I've linked these brushes so that you can snag them at your leisure, and I will see you next time.